Well, welcome everybody. This is our October Superintendent's Roundtable for the Arizona Rural Schools Association, and glad you all were able to make it. My name is Melissa Sadorf. I am the president of the Arizona Rural Schools Association, and my co-host is Sean Rickard. Sean, take it away.
Good morning. Yes, my name is Sean Rickard, and I am the president-elect. So as soon as Melissa's done with her 2 years here in a couple of weeks, I'll take over. We'll move on from there. We just had our elections, which is awfully exciting. We'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. But I'm the superintendent at the Pima Unified School District in Pima, Arizona, which is out here in lovely, cool Graham County. Very, very rural, very, very pleasant. And I apologize if I'm a little sweaty. I had to start moving my office this morning, and so all you rural superintendents know that it's not like in the big metro districts where you just say, hey, I want my office to be moved by tomorrow, and you come in and it's moved. No, I came in and had to start kicking the Allen wrench out to pull apart my desk so that I can move into a portable for the next year and a half while we're building our high school. So yeah. But anyway, so glad to see everybody, and look forward to a great discussion about the issues affecting rural education in Arizona.
So just a couple of things before we get started. As we go through, I will keep monitoring the chat. Feel free to use that, or always the raise your hand feature if you want to chime in and unmute. Really, it is a conversation that we want to make sure that we're having with you. We have things we want to get your opinion on and feedback, as well as have some discussions around issues that might be happening at the Capitol with State Board that you want to make sure that we are weighing in on. I also want to make sure that we take the time to introduce our policy expert. Diane Smith has been working with us for a few months now, and is doing some amazing things already for us down at the Capitol. We appreciate what she's doing, and we're going to make sure that we talk about some things that she's been focusing on for ARSA, and make sure that you are able to put some input in there as well. So right before we get started with the big issues, as Sean said, we did just have an election. I did send out the results a while back, but just to reinforce that our president-elect, as Sean moves into the presidency, is going to be Jamie Festadego from Lake Havasu. Caitlin McGill from Chino Valley is going to continue on as our secretary. And we have a new member of the executive board, Kelly Burns from Yavapai Accommodation District, is going to be coming on board as the treasurer. And then we have Dr. Andy Wanamaker, and he's out of Aguila Elementary District. He's going to be our Southwestern representative. So congratulations to all of those people that are going to be assuming those new roles in January. We're really looking forward to working with them in that capacity. So, and with that, Sean, I'm really going to have you start off with talking about one of the priorities that ARSA identified at our pre-conference in Flagstaff when we had our September annual conference, which was the aggregate expenditure limit and some of the things that we're doing around the AEL. So why don't you kick us off with that?
All right, thank you, Melissa. So as you probably remember, last year during the legislative session, there was a great push to get the legislature to waive the aggregate expenditure limit for fiscal year 23. That kind of had echoes of the conversations that had happened around the aggregate expenditure limit in 22. And if that sounded like a broken record, that's probably because they did it in 21 as well. And so this has kind of become a perennial issue since the classroom site fund spending moved into the aggregate expenditure limit. It didn't used to be excluded from that calculation, but that changed when it stopped being the result of the ballot proposition and started being the result of the legislation that was passed to continue it. Anyway, so the aggregate expenditure limit is a limit on how much the state of Arizona can spend on public education. And it's calculated by taking the amount that was spent in 1980 and adjusting it for changes in enrollment and adjusting it for changes in the value of a dollar, and then increasing that adjusted value by 10%. So, so that calculation is pretty straightforward and kind of makes sense, as much as having an aggregate expenditure limit makes sense. The problem is that it doesn't cover what we're spending. So there are lots of ways that the aggregate expenditure limit could be adjusted so that we wouldn't have this perennial problem with it. But I can get into those if anybody's interested, but the simple solution is that the Constitution recognized that how you calculate the value of a dollar is open to interpretation. There's many different ways of saying, hey, this is the best measure to use. The one that was set as the default, it was called the GDP price deflator, and that value is what's been used every year to calculate the AEL. But the Constitution says that the legislature can choose to change to a different index. And so as a group of superintendents were looking at how we can solve the problem, somebody suggested, well, what if we change the index? What if we used a different value of a dollar? And so we crunched some numbers and determined that yeah, actually, there's a significant difference between what the AEL gets calculated to if you use the current GDP price deflator versus if you use the consumer price index. And actually, you switching to the consumer price index would increase the value of the AEL by roughly $1.8 billion. And you remember from last year's conversation, we were short by 1.3. So it addresses the issue. Now, the big question on everybody's mind is, it addresses the issue for how long? I mean, is this just a fluke that 1 year that works, or is there more to it? So here's what I can tell you on that. I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict the future. Yes, I mean there is a spending limit that would exceed the AEL, no matter what you do to it. But if the legislature had changed the index back in 2008, instead of voting to waive the limit, and both of them take a concurrent resolution, both of them take a 2/3 vote of each house, and both of them do not require being signed by the governor. So it's the exact same political process. If we had taken that path in 2008, we never would have had to change again. We never would have had to waive it. We never would have had to switch the index. We would have solved the problem one time in 2008 and never would have had that instability. So for my part, I think this is a good proposal, because for me, the big problem with the AEL is the instability that it brings into our system. I've talked to lots of superintendents that'll tell you they've had teachers that have left the profession because of the instability that they felt, was caused by these constant every year AEL discussions. Will we have to close schools? Will we have enough money to pay our bills? Will payroll get shut down? And I feel like we owe it to the system, we owe it to our teachers, we owe it to our communities to try to stabilize the AEL discussion. So taking this step would basically adjust the AEL in a way that would take away the need for that annual vote. So that's why I and Melissa and I brought this to the ARSA board, brought it to the discussion that we had in Flagstaff on Thursday before the conference, because we really feel like this is something that helps all rural schools. in a uniform way that we get behind. Any questions? Is anybody interested in all the other ways you can change the AEL? See, I didn't think so. Yeah, so I mean, and that's and the thing
about what needs to happen next, because we all, like you said, have been dealing with this concern for several years now. What is it
right.
that we're proposing and are moving forward with as far as working with the legislative body and the governor's office, some of the things that Diane is doing in Phoenix to make sure that this is something that is understood as a rural concern?
Absolutely. So our next step is to get a concurrent resolution drafted. We're identifying sponsors that can bring that HCR and SCR forward to get that in on the floor, into a committee, discussed, debated, and eventually approved. It would be wonderful if it was approved before March 1st, because if it was approved before March 1st, it'll take effect for fiscal year 25. But if it isn't, then we'd have to deal with next year's possible waiver if that happened. Right now, we're in a weird situation because the legislature approved a waiver for the AEL for fiscal year 24 when they passed the budget for fiscal year 24 back in the whatever that was, the early summer last year. So there isn't that sense of immediacy where budgets are going to get shut down and county superintendents aren't going to cover warrants, that kind of thing. But we do have a need to deal with the overall issue. And I think also maybe because it isn't such a big hot button issue, we can maybe avoid some of the emotionalism that has characterized this conversation in the past too. So that's our path. Get a concurrent resolution drafted in this session, and then get it signed, get it passed. Doesn't have to be signed, just passed and sent to the Secretary of State before March 1st.
Diane, is there anything that you want to bring up as well that members might need to know about, especially if they're talking to their local policymakers that might help them to bring a conversation up in a way that would be effective to moving that AEL resolution forward, concurrent resolution?
Yes, I appreciate that. The biggest thing is the word that we've been using is stability for the school districts. I'm always a full disclosure, so we have some folks out there that think that this may not be something we want to put our political capital to, but I think we're going to have political capital in this one way or the other. So I'm very excited that the Rural Schools Association, that we're going to continue to move forward. We're moving forward in a bipartisan manner because we're going to need 40 and 20. And as Sean said, you need 40 and 20 to do a waiver. You need 40 and 20 to change it to CPI, which we believe could be longer term than people are thinking. But if nothing else, even if it takes us 5 years down the road, it gets it off of our plate. And we believe that we can get this bipartisan coalition together to do this. Now, there are some folks that want to use the leverage of the waiver with the budget. Personally, I think that's a little bit scary because this is going to be a really tough year. Every year at the legislature is tough. But again, with the 2024 election coming up, with issues on the table like abortion, ESAs, we've confirmed month after month that the state revenue continues to go down, not up. And so if we believe, and the leadership at ARSA believes, that this would get a major issue off of the table. So as you're working with your locals, and we'll get some talking points, Sean's going to send something out, but we'll get 3 to 5 talking points that could be common that would be, and the other point that Melissa made, there are no winners and losers in this. Everybody's a winner with this. So oftentimes when we look at legislative issues, we say, who are the winners and losers? This is winners for everyone. So I don't know if that helps, Melissa, but that's kind of, the overview, that it's stability for districts. It gets it off the table, that we don't have to be thinking about it every year. And again, if we could get this done before March 1st, that would be awesome.
Yeah, agreed. So Sean, you want to talk a little bit about the documents that Diane referenced, and then what do we anticipate would help the process that members might be able to get involved in?
Sure. So there's two documents. One is a kind of a Sean-splaining of the whole thing, basically the what you just got on paper with some tables, and kind of spells out the formula a little bit more clearly. The other is kind of a policy document approach of what's the policy issue that we're addressing, and what's the the solution. And it kind of outlines the steps that we've taken as far as this has been vetted through economists, this has been vetted through constitutional attorneys. It kind of spells out some of those details. So, depending on who you're talking to and what their level of concern is, I think, and one of the things that, we need to remember on this is, we need it dealt with, and we need it dealt with quickly. When Diane mentioned, that folks question the utilization of political capital for something that isn't a long-term solution. And I think of two things. One is all of the other solutions require going to the ballot to get approval from the voters for a change to the AEL calculation, either eliminating it or modifying it in some way, to make it fairer. And anything that goes on the ballot then is competing for just that, for political capital, for votes with your bonds and your overrides that we know are essential to being able to operate schools. And so that's one of the things that I think we need to kind of keep on our minds is that we don't want to just putting something on the ballot is not a simple process, and it affects the calculations that voters are going to take to every other yes vote that they're going to give for funding on education. And this doesn't give us any money. I mean, we don't get any more money based on the AEL. We get money when the legislature passes a budget, and what the AEL does is it creates an obstacle to being able to spend that money. And I mean, it's the most ridiculous thing in the world to spend any political capital on. But unfortunately, because of some things that have happened, we find ourselves in that position.
So Sean, can you talk a little bit about the meetings that you've already had? You and Diane have been up at the Capitol doing some groundwork for moving this concept forward, and then some things that are coming up in the next few weeks with making sure that our policymakers know what's going on and what the rural schools position is.
Sure. Yeah, Diane's been very busy talking with staffers. I know, we've made sure that Emma, who's the new, I cannot remember her last name, but what is it?
Emma Blair.
There we go. I should remember that. Okay, so she's the new staff at the Senate. Many of you may have had the opportunity to meet her up in Flagstaff. She's very well versed on this topic and our position on it, which is great, because she's one of the ones that folks will definitely go to. I know Diane and I sat down with Ken Bennett from up in the Yavapai County, who's the chairman of the Senate Education Committee. We talked about it. I had the opportunity to sit down with Representative Pingarelli a couple months back when this was still kind of just coming out. And she seems like she might be open to it. We've talked to staffers on the Senate side, staffers on the House side, that are all again understanding And I think the biggest thing is, in conversations that we've had with leadership, I mean, up to and including the Speaker of the House, there is a general desire among the leadership in the legislature to have this issue go away. That they're not a huge fan of giving legislators a second bite at the apple when it comes to the biggest chunk of the budget in Arizona. And unfortunately, that's kind of what the AEL waivers have become in some years. Is, oh, well, hey, you need my vote again? Oh, well, now I want this. Boy, I thought we had a deal. Well, let's make a new deal. So there is a lot of support among leadership for this. When you're talking to your legislators, I mean, just talk to them about the need for stability. I mean, whenever I talk to my legislators, I always take it back to the number one issue affecting our ability to get the job done, and that is, teacher retention. And having teachers feel like they're safe in their jobs, they're safe in their contracts, they're, that things are not crazy, unstable, I mean, that helps to convince them to come back next year. And helping legislators to understand that's our number one fight, and this is a small step in the right direction.
Yeah.
And maybe Melissa could talk a little bit about some of the information she's been gathering about what else is being said about teacher retention, but I'm not sure that's on the agenda.
It's not, but it's the same things that we've been talking about, that, for every position that's open, whether or not you're even getting applicants is the question right now. It used to be maybe you get 10 or 15, and then it dropped down to, well, maybe you get 5, and now we're down to if you get anybody for some of our positions that are open, you're lucky. And it's not just certified, it's classified as well. We're having a problem with drivers right now, and that's not unique to my situation. So, those kinds of things, really, when there's not that stability in your budget, and people know, because it's been talked about session after session, that we have issues around stability of funding, and that, hey, we're going to be cutting your budget, and in April you're done, and we're not going to pay you anymore after April because we have to shut school. That kind of discussion in a school district causes a lot of angst, and teachers are not all that excited about hanging out and finding that, hey, I don't have a job after today because they're cutting the budget. So the stability question is something that I agree with you, Sean and Diane, that word is something that we want to make sure we're really hammering home when we're talking about the AEL. So I don't know if that really answers your question, because there's a lot of
Right.
Recruitment and retention, but really I think it just comes down to, we don't want to put barriers in place for people that are applying for our positions or are considering applying for our position.
Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
Diane, go ahead, and then I'll remind people, if you have questions, put them in the chat or raise your virtual hand.
And before Sean moves to the A to F real quickly, I want to just give everybody, if it's okay, a really quick heads up about Emma Blair. She was thrilled to be at the Rural Schools Conference this year. She was there last year when she was working with GCU, but in her new role, and because of it, she has asked the Rural Schools leadership and myself, we put together a list. She's going across the state. She's going to Mojave County. She's going to Graham County. She's going to 2 districts in Mojave County. She's going across the state to talk to district rural leaders to find out, what are your big issues. So be thinking about that, because as Sean always says, it's different whether it's in, Graham County or whether it's in Yuma or whether it's in Mojave County. But she's going to be talking about special ed. That seems to be a big issue everywhere with the State Board of Ed and everywhere. So be thinking about, which goes back to recruitment and retaining teachers for special ed, cost of special ed. The other thing she's going to be asking about is what you think would be some of your funded or unfunded mandates that you would love to have repealed. And look at that. Senator Bennett, when Sean and I met with him, he wants to look at a rewrite of Title 15, which I said is not even reasonable. People have tried that before, but I'm just telling you, that is huge for Emma Blair at the state Senate to be taking such a huge interest in you guys as rural leaders. And that's just really exciting. So that's just kind of a segue of that whole piece going back to the conference and the things that she learned there.
I appreciate that, Diane. That's good information. And if any of you would like to reach out to Emma and start a conversation around some of your unique needs and your barriers, make sure that you let Diane know, and she can help facilitate that introduction. It's a very good relationship to foster, and she really is interested in knowing where our pain points are. So, Diane, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and just one thing to add to that, right now is the busiest time for staffers at the legislature because it's not an election year. So legislators are already starting to get bills ready to be introduced. So for her to take this time out in November is huge. But as Melissa said, she is very interested, and she would be, she will have time for Zoom meetings and whatever you guys want to put together. But then once session's over, then we're going to help it's one of the things that I'm going to be working with you all on to try to really facilitate that and get some of these staffers out to your district, because that makes a big difference. So sorry.
No, it's a good information and good forward thinking as well. So if there are no other questions or input around the AEL, look for those documents that we'll be sending out that Sean discussed, and use those in your own conversations with your local legislators. And I think it'll be good information for you to have. But I don't see anything in the chat. And so Sean, do you want to move on? Sean is the chairman for the ATAC, working with the state board, and we had some interesting conversations around letter grades. So you want to talk a little bit about that?
Okay. So the state accountability system, we're actually pretty close to approving business rules for the current year. So for school year 23-24 at this point. But what's kind of the big thing right now is the fact that the state board at their meeting Monday approved the cut scores for letter grades for K-8 and for 9-12 for school year 22-23. So and basically those cut scores are exactly the same as last year, which is reassuring. And for K-8, they're actually the same as the cut scores that we've had going all the way back to 17. So we've got some nice consistency there. So letter grades themselves will be released, I believe, next Monday or Tuesday. Statute says they have to be released by Wednesday, and I believe they're going to try to do it a day or two before the statutory deadline, which means that you can expect, they'll be public at that point. So the big file with everybody's letter grades will be out, and all of the media attention and all that fun crap. But yeah, it's been an interesting process, getting to this point for schools. If you are filing an appeal, that's got to be done by like yesterday, right, Diane? Diane's muted.
She's looking it up.
I know. But yeah, so one of the big pushes that the state board has asked me to, what are some of the things that are grounds for appeals, and how can we get rid of them? To try to clean it up to where schools aren't getting hung up in as many things. And so that's been part of the big push this year. But like I said, there really haven't been very many significant changes. One thing I will tell you is I've heard rumors, people are talking about the fiscal year 24 letter grades that that the state would be eliminating growth out of that calculation, and it would just be based on proficiency. I haven't heard that in my position with the ATAC. And what I have been told by Sean Ross, who's the executive director of the state board, and the state board is the one that approves the business rules. What Sean Ross has said is that any changes to the business rules that are used for calculating letter grades would have to be presented to the ATAC, discussed by the ATAC, and approved, or at least a recommendation from the ATAC would have to go to the state board before the state board would take any action on a change to the business rules. And so, since I haven't seen anything on an agenda for the ATAC to discuss any changes that would get rid of growth, I can say that that's something that I don't expect. Now, where it gets a little bit murky is that you've got, in Arizona, we've got two accountability systems, the state accountability system and the federal accountability system. And the federal accountability system is not nearly as transparent when it comes to the process of developing the rules. That's something that ESSER, ESSA, every Student Succeeds Act requires that the State Department submit their rules. But state accountability is driven by state statute, which says that the rules have to be approved by the State Board of Education. So two different processes. And I know there are some folks in federal accountability that feel like, that growth is overvalued. And because that's coming out of the department, that's something that we could see a change as we go from the Hoffman department recommendations to the Horn department administration. So if you hear about changes in growth, it has to do with federal accountability, and that has to do with your TSI, your CSI, your ATSI, and those things, but it doesn't have anything to do with your letter grade.
Diane,
Any questions?
did you have something?
Yes, so keep an eye out, because they said at the State Board of Ed meeting, they may even get the letter grades out by Friday, which is tomorrow. So, and once the letter grades are out officially, the appeals window opens. The appeals window closes on November 15th at 5 o'clock, and everything has to be done electronically now. There were a few things that are changed on the appeals process, but on the website, they really pushed that they're going to have a lot of videos. They're really trying to work together between Sean. So there's three Seans: Sean Smith at ADE, Sean Ross, Executive Director of the State Board, and Sean Rickard with ATAC and ARSA and everything else. But they're really encouraging people to really look at that. The other thing, Sean, do you remember they did mention about district letter grades? Because that was a question.
Yeah.
So I think.
So district letter grades are pretty simple. I mean, basically, you take your letter grade, put it on a 4-point scale, and then it's the mean of all of your site grades. So if you're a single site, then obviously that's so easy math. If you've got an A, like I've got 3 sites that have grades, an A, a B, and a C. So I would be a B district.
Anything else that people have questions or concerns about that they want to talk about with letter grades? Okay. Just very quickly, there's a couple of changes that are happening on the state board. We do have a new board member that was appointed by the governor. Deanna Tovar is coming on board. And then there are 2 other seats that are going to be opening up in January. And so you can expect that there'll be 2 more appointments made by the governor to the state board coming up fairly soon. So as we move into the new year, the board will look different, and it'll be interesting to see how those new seats change the dynamic of the board and some of the decisions that they might be making coming up. So just keep that in mind as well. All right, anything else, Sean, on that, or do you want to move to our next topic?
Let's move along.
Okay. So there are a couple of things that are topics of conversation right now at the Department of Ed. And the first one is the tutoring that has been put out by our SPI. And then the second thing is the SRO program. You want to talk a little bit about either one of those? Are there people that have questions about either one of those? I know that Sean and Diane have been following that as well.
Well, I mean, on the tutoring, you know, it is a significant grant that's available. You know, schools should definitely look at the extent to which, you know, it might meet their needs. So yeah, you know, it's interesting right now, this battle, you know, over, are we going to spend money based on the previous priorities, or are we going to spend money based on the current priorities? You know, remember Tom Horn scared the crap out of a bunch of people and he threatened to sweep a bunch of grants, and then got a lot of pushback and backed off on a bunch of them. And that's where a lot of this money has come from. So it's touchy, but yeah, I'm curious how many, you know, people here on the call feel like, you know, getting an armed officer in their school is a top priority need that the state's now going to help with. I saw Peter kind of winced a little bit when we mentioned it initially, but
yeah, well, it was a wince of mistake. We applied for it, and our grants manager significantly undershot the amount of money that we needed. And so we dropped the ball on that. And so I've been calling once a week to make my case to rework that. And in fact, I've got a voicemail from Nancy is her name. I don't remember her last name, to see if we can get that fixed. But I'm concerned that I'm getting I think it's the SIS, or I can't remember what it's called, but we have a deputy. My governing board president works for Pinal County Sheriff. We have a deputy ready to go, but that deputy is $158,000 and we got $70,000. So the armed presence, and this, I wrote a novella to them, and for us, it's not what, this was my rule play, right? Is that it's not about whether or not I am Santan Valley and I have things going on at my campus all the time. It's about that I'm 30 minutes away from first responders.
Yeah.
I said, that's my concern. I said, so you guys look at my district as a district that's rural, small, I don't have a lot of enrollment. Yeah, I may or may not have the problems. I've had actually 2 threats this year where we've had significant, I've had a hit list, I've had kids, I mean, we've had some issues. Just because I'm rural doesn't mean we're without issues. So, but when I make a phone call, it goes to the Pinal County Sheriff's Department. There are 3 other police departments that are closer to me than the sheriffs are. And sheriffs have flat out said, our best chance is 30 minutes from you. And that's lights and sirens, if we're lucky. And so, and I've got my governing board president saying, yeah, we have no shot out there. So that's been my plight is you're missing the rural plight in the fact that it's not about whether or not we have big district issues. It's about how fast can I get somebody out here? So it's not about, when you say armed presence, my mind jumps to, do I have problems on my campus? Maybe, maybe not to Santan issues. But when and if I do, my news report is going to be, I had to wait 30 minutes to take care of that one time that it happened. Yeah. And that's what's being missed at the state level is, what is the response time? And that's how I put my email to him. I said, so if we ever do have an emergency and we do lose loss of life, it's not going to be because of my safety, because my school's locked. I have gates. I have every classroom's locked. You can't get into a class without a key. I couldn't do more to make this place a prison. But what's going to be the news is that it was 30 minutes. for a first responder to get out here. And that's why we have loss of life, not because of anything else. And so that's been my plight. So yeah, that's why I winced, is because I blew it with our grant. I undershot it, and didn't realize that if we write 70,000, I can't ever change it, because I made a deal with the devil at 70,000. And I cannot adjust the grant, which blows my mind, but whatever. But then, yeah, what's my response time? Who's going to come out here and take care of me? And they don't have any idea of the 911 system. It goes directly to the Pinal County Sheriff's. I have Border Patrol 10 minutes from here. I have a DPS officer that's stationed out in front of my exit all the time, lighting up people. He'll never know what's going on, because it's a closed system. So that's my wins, Sean.
No,
It's
yeah,
a valid concern. There's Mary Faley out in Sonoyta, same thing, 30 minutes response time. Stanfield, same thing, 30 minutes on a good day. And they are spread thin around Staff County at the Sheriff's Department, because there's at any given time only a handful of officers, and they could be on the other side of the county. So then it's
Right.
even longer than that, depending on where they are that given day. So it's a concern.
Yeah, like Casa Grande could get to you sooner than
Yeah.
the county sheriff's,
Oh,
but
no.
Casa Grande
Yeah.
will never know anything's going on unless dispatch from the sheriff's office calls Casa Grande.
Right.
So yeah, it's an interesting. So that's my wins.
Anyone else on school safety and the SRO grant? Okay. Is anyone planning on applying for the tutoring program? Have you done that too? Peter, go ahead.
It's funny, we did, and we have title money that we're using for tutoring, but we also applied for it. But it's funny, is talking to my principal, nobody wants to do it. I'm struggling to have teachers want to go tutor.
Yep.
That's the challenge, right? Is that everybody's beat up, everybody's tired, and it's hard, and it's about money, but it's not always about money anymore. So
Right.
So our challenge right now is, in a staff of 25, 30, is getting enough tutors to tutor. That's the hard part. That's our challenge. It's not just the money, it's the manpower to get the existing staff. We've had to get creative. We've got paras in there with teachers. We're making it work, but it's also bodies.
Well, and the other thing too is we've got ESSER funds, that ESSER $3 needed to be spent on academic recovery. And so obviously that means tutoring for us. And so now I'm competing with two different potential grants, and I've got to spend ESSER dollars because they end next year. So, the timing for this grant is a little bit off in terms of being able to build some capacity within programming, for at least for my district. I'm not sure what else you guys are doing with your ESSER dollars, but for us, we have the funds right now, and we need to spend them down, because I don't want to leave capacity in that ESSER 3 grant. So, well, we've got it.
it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see what happens, because I mean, these tutoring grants and the SRO grants, I mean, they're hard to spend things. I mean, we've struggled, to get an SRO that would work in our district.
Right.
Law enforcement officers generally look at SRO work as, gosh, I got to work days all the time. I never get a night shift, which is kind of like getting paid for, in a rural town, it's kind of getting paid for doing nothing. But they're like, I'm not getting paid extra. I'm just working harder. And so that's really kind of made it hard for us to get or keep. Plus I know an SRO that served over in Safford for a couple of years, and said they just become a lightning rod for all kinds of negative social media attention, complaints in the community, that they then have to sort through. So that makes it hard to identify candidates for the positions. And so if my concern is if with the SRO monies that Superintendent Horn has kind of laid out, as well as with the tutoring monies. If that isn't getting spent, how is that going to affect the narrative over the need for additional funding for K-12 education? Because there's a good chance they're going to come back and say, well, look, we gave you money, you didn't need it, you didn't spend it, you didn't, and they don't realize, well, our ability to meet the needs of children is much more about attracting, entertaining teachers to teach classes, and these other supplemental things are great, but what's killing our public schools isn't SROs and after school tutoring. So
Sean,
Well-
I'm gonna go ahead, then I'm gonna pivot us to the hotline. I want Diane to talk a little bit about what's going on with the hotline.
Okay, sorry to jump, but the disconnect is that you can put out funding for a lot of things, but the funding doesn't generate the people to do the job.
Right.
So that's the disconnect. I've been asked to go to the county supervisors meeting to speak to them to hire another sheriff, that to get bodies. So if you're an SRO, you don't dream, if you were in the sheriff's department, you don't dream of going to be an SRO. That's not these guys' job, right? You don't become a sheriff to be an SRO. You're only going to get typically one type of person that's into their career. It's going to cost you a ton of money because they're into their career. We're paying for into their retirement, which they all actually just redid their entire retirement structure. They did, and which is horrible what they all just went through. But there's a gigantic disconnect that falls into what you just said, Sean, is that they don't have bodies to give us our SROs. We can have $1 kabillion sitting and waiting to go. They're not there because they don't have the funding or the bodies to even do patrol. And I had the supervisor tell me, Chief said, I'm not taking a guy off patrol to come to your school. I can't. And so that's our challenge. There's the disconnect that ADE is not seeing. Superintendent Horn's not hearing from us, is that, hey, you can fund all you want, but it doesn't change the bodies that are available to bring those people in. So anyways.
absolutely.
Well, we'll jump on that bandwagon any day of the week. Let us know if you need our stories too, as you're talking to your policymakers and influencers in your rural areas. Diane, one of the things that we wanted to surface, just so that everybody has it on their radar, is the mandatory reporting hotline. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on with that?
Yes, and I just want to say thank you for the issue with the people. And you guys now have a rural connection at the department, correct?
Yes, Henry Dunkerson is our liaison, and so he's always available for those kinds of concerns and questions, and really would like to hear if you have those concerns, so that he can take them up the chain of command.
And you might want to think about, having 3 or 4 people meet with him because I think the people issue just goes right back to recruit, retain, retrain, teachers and all staff. And to Sean's point, they look at it, well, you don't need the money. It's not that you can't find the people. So the issue that I talked about is, the State Board of Ed is really working on the mandatory reporting for discipline to try to make it better, not to try to identify more people that have a problem. I had a call from one of your rural superintendents that they've had real issues when they've called the hotline to report, and they have all kinds of report IDs, and then nothing happens. And so they asked me what I could do. So I actually got a hold of David Lujan, who's now the well, they all have different titles, but he's actually the director, but he's technically the deputy director of the Department of Child Safety. And we were just wondering if that's an issue that you all are having. I've known David. He's awesome. He's an attorney. He was a legislator. He was with Children's Action Alliance. He's just an all-around great guy, and he inherited a lot of issues. But the hotline issue is really critical if you all don't feel like they're following up on reports that you're making. And the superintendent up in Cotton with Oak Creek, that's what they've had some significant issues. And I just wondered if that's something that's happening across the state that we may need to, you know, bring as a, you know, a bigger concern.
If you do have those concerns around the hotline, please make sure that you reach out to Diane. Her email is on our email list. If you don't have it, let me know. I'll make sure that you get it. But we do want to make sure that if those are concerns that you're seeing in your communities, that we're able to support you in getting some response around that. Okay. Well, we've got about 5 minutes left. And a couple of things in the chat I dropped to save the date. January 19th, we're having our first annual ARSA Winter Advocacy Workshop. It's a new thing for us, so we're opening it up to the first 35 people that put in for it. Then we'll open up a wait list. No cost to ARSA members, and you will be looking at getting a $250 scholarship paid for by our business partners. To cover the cost of travel in case you need to get a hotel for the night. If you're coming from further rural Arizona, we want to make sure that you have the chance to participate. Don't want that to be a barrier for you getting up there if that's something you're interested in. We'll be talking about advocacy efforts, how to tell your story, communication 101, those kinds of things that Diane is going to be leading us through. She's obviously the guru of advocacy work, and we want to tap into her expertise. So look for that information to come out in November. Sean, anything that you want to say before we end for the roundtable?
Well, yeah, let's, the other save the date that we talked about is, has to do with our 2024 conference in Flagstaff. And we listened, a lot of superintendents, especially rural superintendents, felt like being away from the district for ASA law at the very beginning of September was something they had to do because they had board members that went. And then to have ARSA the very next week was just, it's hard to be away 2 weeks in a row. And so we were able to work it with the ranch for the golf tournament, as well as with our new host at High Country, to move that back a week. So we now have a week between law and the rural schools conference. The other thing that we did, you know, for some reason, this conference has always been a, you know, start Thursday, meet on, you know, the meat of the conference it was on Friday, and then it wrapped up on Saturday, which has always been kind of weird. And next year's conference will be a little bit more traditional. We'll start on Wednesday with the reception. We'll have our breakouts on Thursday, and then Friday morning we'll wrap up with our business meeting, and who knows, maybe even a surprise that we haven't quite nailed down yet. But that way, you know, we're not digging into people's weekend as much, and which I don't know. I hope you'll appreciate. Plus, it makes, you know, all those superintendents that need to get back for Friday Night Lights. I know we've always had a couple superintendents that have had to miss things because they had to get back to their district for that big community event, you know, during the football season. So that's a change to look forward to. Melissa just dropped those dates in the chat as well. So get those on your calendar so that you can look forward to that. Accommodations won't be at the Little America. They'll be at the Drury Hotel, right there in Flagstaff at the NAU campus as we move the conference to the High Country. So Drury Inn. So, all right. That leaves 2 minutes.
Diane, anything you want to close with before we chime out?
No, I had thought of something, but now I forgot it. So,
Okay. Well, as always, thanks for attending. If you have anything that you'd like to see us addressing in our next roundtable coming up in November, end of November, please let us know. We are looking at, in December, having Alan Pratt from the National Rural Education Association join us for the Water Matters report that's dropping, and that has rural data from across the country, but specifically we'll be looking at Arizona to have him come and walk us through that report. It's good information for you to have. So looking forward to seeing you at the next event. Everybody stay safe out there, and we will see you at the table in November. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.